Hagrid liked lessons best when the sky was clear and the kids were loud. It meant they were not scared. He had a group of third years on the edge of the Forbidden Forest, where the grass turned rough and the trees started to crowd together. He was showing them tracks in the mud. Big ones, small ones, claw marks. A torn leaf that meant something heavy had passed. "Now, you don't follow tracks like that alone," Hagrid said. "You tell a professor, or me, or—" The air snapped. Not like thunder, not like a spell. Like the world itself made a mistake. Hagrid stopped talking. The students stopped too. Even the birds went quiet. Right in front of the tree line, the air split open in a thin line. Black and red light pushed out, like a cut that would not close. The grass bent away from it as if it didn't want to be near it. One boy whispered, "Sir, is that—" "It ain't normal," Hagrid said, low and careful. His hand went to his pink umbrella, even though he hated using it in front of kids. The tear widened. Something fell out. It hit the ground with a heavy thud, like a man in a long coat had been dropped from a roof. Dirt jumped. Leaves shook. Then the figure stood up like nothing hurt. He was tall. He wore a red coat that looked too clean for the forest. His hair was dark and messy. His face was pale, like moonlight on stone. His eyes were red. Not red like a trick. Red like they were meant to be that way. He brushed dirt off his shoulder. Slow, calm, almost bored. The students backed up. One girl squeaked and grabbed her friend's sleeve. Hagrid took one step forward. His heart thumped, but he didn't let it show. "All right," he called. "Who are you?" Then, the stranger turned his head toward Hagrid. He looked Hagrid up and down, like he was reading a book. Then he smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was the kind that said, "This might be fun." Before Hagrid could speak again, something else moved near the trees. A low, scraping sound. Then another. A pair of acromantula, big spiders, the size of small tables, pushed out from the shadows. Not the biggest in the forest, but big enough to make children scream. They came fast. "Back!" Hagrid shouted, spreading his arms wide. "Get behind me!" The spiders leapt. The stranger did not step back. He lifted one hand. The shadows under the spiders stretched up like living hands. Thick, black shapes grabbed their legs in midair. The spiders jerked, trapped, claws clicking. Then the shadows pulled them down hard. The ground shook. One spider tried to bite. Its fangs hit the shadow, and the shadow didn't care. The stranger tilted his head, watching it struggle like it was a science lesson. Then he snapped his fingers. The shadows tightened. The spider stopped moving. No blood, no mess. Just stillness, as if the forest had held its breath and refused to let go. The students stared. A few were crying. A few were frozen like statues. Hagrid did not move for a second, because he was trying to understand what he had just seen. The stranger turned back to Hagrid and spoke in a low voice that sounded smooth and sharp at the same time. "Interesting place," he said. "Very old. Very proud." Hagrid swallowed. "You can't just do that near students." The stranger's smile widened. "You're worried about rules." Behind them, the castle's magic reacted. Hagrid felt it before he saw it. The air around Hogwarts flashed with invisible pressure. The wards, the hidden protections, woke up. Far away, windows rattled. A bell rang once, though no one had touched it. Up on a tower, a tall figure appeared at a window. Professor Dumbledore. Even from here, Hagrid could feel the change. Dumbledore did not look scared. He looked focused, like he had seen storms before, and already knew where to stand. Dumbledore's eyes fixed on the stranger. The stranger looked up, slowly, like he had been waiting for that exact moment. He grinned at the headmaster, as if they were sharing a private joke. Dumbledore's voice carried, calm and clear. "That," he said softly, "is not a wizard." And the stranger's red eyes gleamed, like the words had just made the game start. Harry first heard about it at dinner. He was halfway through listening to Ron complain about homework when the great hall buzzed like a beehive. Heads turned, whispers spread in waves. A few owls flapped away from the rafters like they were spooked. Hermione leaned forward, eyes sharp. "Something happened near the forest," Ron frowned. "How do you know?" Hermione pointed. "Look," Professor McGonagall had stepped into the hall and spoke in a voice that cut right through the noise. "Prefects," she said, "walk your houses back to the common rooms. No one goes outside. No one wanders. This is not a suggestion." That last part made everyone actually move. Harry's stomach tightened. Not a suggestion meant danger. In the Gryffindor common room, the rumor exploded into 10 different versions. "A Death Eater landed in the forest! It was a dragon! It was a demon! Seamus swore he saw smoke through the window. Lavender swore she heard screaming. Dean insisted it was all made up. Hermione wasn't buying any of it. None of you know!" she snapped. "Stop guessing!" Ron looked at Harry. "You reckon it's you-know-who?" Harry didn't answer. He didn't know why, but his scar didn't hurt. That made him feel worse, not better. When Voldemort was near, his scar usually told him. This felt like something else. Later, the Fat Lady portrait swung open, and Professor Dumbledore stepped in with Professor McGonagall and Professor Snape. Dumbledore's calm made the room go quiet. "My apologies for the disruption," Dumbledore said. "Hogwarts is safe, but we have a visitor." Ron whispered, "A visitor?" Snape's eyes swept the room like a knife. "None of you will speak of this outside your common room," he said, "and none of you will go looking for it." Hermione's hand shot up anyway, because Hermione's hand always went up. "What kind of visitor, Headmaster?" she asked. Her voice was polite, but her eyes were hungry for facts. Dumbledore watched her for a moment. "A being not of our world," he said simply. Harry's heart thumped once, hard. Dumbledore's gaze shifted to Harry, like he already knew where that thought had gone. "Mr. Potter," he said, gentle, "you will not involve yourself. Not this time." Harry opened his mouth. Snape cut in fast. "You can't possibly be planning to—" Dumbledore raised one hand. Snape stopped, but his face stayed tight. "We will handle it," Dumbledore said to the room. "Good night." They left. The common room slowly came back to life. But Harry stayed quiet. A being not of our world. He had met strange things before, but Hogwarts itself had never felt like it was bracing for impact. In the headmaster's office, the air felt different. It always felt a little odd in there, like there were too many minds watching. The portraits whispered when they thought no one listened. Silver instruments clicked and whirred, measuring things no student could name. Fawkes, the phoenix, sat calm as a statue. Now, the office felt like it was holding its breath. The visitor stood in the center of the room, hands in his pockets, like he had been invited to tea. Professor McGonagall stood near the desk, wand ready but not pointed. Her face was hard. Professor Snape stood closer, like he wanted to be the first thing between the visitor and Dumbledore. His eyes were narrowed, cold, and sharp. Dumbledore stood behind his desk, hands relaxed, as if this was a normal meeting. The visitor looked around with slow interest. He leaned closer to one of the silver instruments. It clicked wildly and smoked. He smiled. "Please do not touch that," McGonagall said. He did not move away right away. He looked at her, amused. "Rules," he said again, like the word tasted funny. Dumbledore's voice stayed soft. "We have rules here because we have children," he said. The visitor glanced at Fawkes, then back to Dumbledore. And you protect them. I do, Dumbledore said. Good, the visitor replied, as if grating him. Snape's hand tightened on his wand. What are you? He asked. The visitor turned his head toward Snape. Red eyes. Calm smile. What do you think? He asked back. Snape did not flinch. A vampire, he said. McGonagall's eyes flicked to Snape. She did not look surprised. She looked angry that he might be right. Dumbledore watched the visitor carefully. Do you have a name? He asked. The visitor paused, like he was deciding if the name mattered. Alucard, he said at last. McGonagall blinked. That is not a common name. Alucard shrugged. I'm not common. Snape's voice went quieter. Do you feed? He asked. It was not curiosity. It was a threat, shaped like a question. Alucard's smile showed a hint of teeth. Yes. McGonagall's wand lifted a little. Not here, she snapped. Alucard tilted his head. You have a hospital, he said. Blood in jars. Warm bodies in beds. It would be easy. McGonagall's face went pale with anger. How dare you? Dumbledore spoke before the room exploded. You will not harm a student, he said. And his voice did not rise. It did not need to. The air itself seemed to agree with him. Alucard looked at Dumbledore for a long moment. Then he smiled in a different way, less sharp, more thoughtful. Make it worth my time, he said. Snape's eyes flashed. There it is, he said. The truth. Dumbledore nodded slightly, as if he had expected that. You're not here by choice, are you? He asked. Alucard's gaze flicked toward the window, toward the world outside. I arrived, he said. That is all. Dumbledore waited. Alucard did not explain further. He didn't have to. He looked like someone who had seen too many things to care about giving a speech. McGonagall took a slow breath. Headmaster, she said, clipped. We cannot keep a predator in a school. Alucard's eyes turned to her. Predator, he repeated, pleased. Better than liar. Snape stepped forward a fraction. If you are what I think you are, he said, then you are not only dangerous, you are arrogant. Alucard's smile widened. Yes. Fawkes shifted, feathers rustling, as if even the phoenix found that answer annoying. Dumbledore lifted a hand, and one of the instruments stopped smoking. The office quieted again. We will do this plainly, Dumbledore said. You will tell me what you want. Alucard leaned back, hands still in his pockets. I want to know where I am, he said, and who thinks they can stop me? McGonagall's eyes narrowed. Is that a threat? Alucard's gaze slid to her wand. No, he said. It is a question. Snape's mouth tightened. The answer is us, he said. Alucard looked at him like he was considering swatting a fly. You, he said, and the word held polite mockery. Perhaps, if you are clever. Snape's eyes went colder. Dumbledore spoke gently. Alucard, he said, as if testing the name. Hogwarts will not be a hunting ground. If you accept that, you may stay here under watch until we understand what happened. Alucard laughed once, quiet. Under watch, he repeated, by children with sticks. McGonagall bristled. Wands, she snapped. Alucard looked pleased again. Sticks, he said anyway. Dumbledore did not argue. He simply watched. Alucard's smile faded slightly. This place is strong, he admitted. Your walls are not just stone. They are home, Dumbledore said. Alucard's eyes flicked to the portraits, then to Fawkes, then back to Dumbledore. Fine, he said. I will not eat your children. McGonagall looked like she wanted to throw him out the window. Snape's voice was low. And if you do? He asked. Alucard met his gaze. Then you will try, he said simply. And I will see if you can. McGonagall's jaw clenched so hard Harry would have been scared of it, if Harry had been there. Dumbledore nodded once, like the agreement had been signed. "Then we begin," he said. "You will have a room. You will not leave the castle grounds without permission. You will not enter student dormitories. You will not enter the restricted section." Alucard's eyes flashed with amusement. "Restricted," he said, like he loved the word. Snape spoke fast. "He will ignore it." Alucard smiled. "He knows me already." Dumbledore's eyes stayed kind. "Then we will deal with what you do, not what we fear," he said. McGonagall's voice was tight. "And the Ministry?" Dumbledore's smile turned faint. "The Ministry will learn," he said. "In time." Snape looked like he had tasted something bitter. "They will not wait," he said. Dumbledore didn't deny it. Downstairs, in the corridors, Alucard walked like he owned the place. It wasn't loud. It wasn't rude in a simple way. It was worse. It was calm. He stopped in front of a suit of armor and tapped it lightly. The armor moved, stiff and alert, like it didn't like being touched. Alucard leaned close to it. "You are awake," he murmured. "Cute." The armor raised its sword. Before it could swing, Alucard's shadow lifted and pressed the sword arm down gently, like a parent stopping a child. The armor froze. Alucard moved on. A portrait hissed at him. "Filthy creature," it snapped. Alucard glanced at it. "I've been called worse," he said, and kept walking. A pair of house elves peeked around a corner. Their big eyes were wide. Alucard looked down at them. "Do you live in the walls?" he asked, almost curious. The elves squeaked and vanished. He chuckled softly. In the staff room, later, McGonagall slammed her cup down. "He's not staying," she said. Dumbledore sipped tea like nothing was wrong. "He's staying," he replied. Snape's voice was cold. "And when he breaks your rules?" he asked. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled, but not with humor. "Then we respond," he said. "We do not panic." McGonagall leaned forward. "Albus," she said, voice low. He spoke of the hospital wing like it was a pantry. Dumbledore's expression softened. "He spoke to provoke," he said, "and to measure us." Snape's mouth curled. "He measured and found you gentle," he said. "That is not always a compliment." Dumbledore set down his cup. "Gentle does not mean weak," he said. Snape did not answer, but his eyes said he remembered exactly how strong Dumbledore could be. Hermione Granger did not sleep much that night. Harry found her in the common room early, books spread around her like a nest. Her hair was messier than usual. That meant she was serious. "You're doing it already," Ron said, yawning. "Research about the thing." "It's not a thing," Hermione snapped without looking up. "It's a being." And yes, Harry sat across from her. "What have you found?" he asked. Hermione's eyes flicked up, bright. "Old books talk about vampires," she said. "Most are weak, sunlight, steaks, garlic, all that." Ron perked up. "Garlic works?" Hermione rolled her eyes. "Not like that," she said. "And this one is different." Harry frowned. "How do you know?" Hermione tapped the page. "Because the descriptions don't fit," she said. "He walked into Hogwarts wards like he didn't even notice." Ron swallowed. "So what is he?" Hermione's voice dropped. "Something old," she said. "And something that has done this before." Harry felt a chill. "Done what?" Hermione hesitated, then said it plainly. "Arrived where he doesn't belong," she said, "and survived it." Ron stared at the fire. "Brilliant," he muttered. "Just what we need." Harry thought of the Acromantula rumor, thought of the way people said the spiders just stopped. His scar still didn't hurt. That was the worst part. It meant Voldemort wasn't nearby. It meant this was a different kind of danger. By morning, the ministry knew. They always did. Owls arrived in a tight flock, thumping onto the staff table like bombs. Letters unrolled themselves, official and sharp. McGonagall's face hardened as she read. "They want a full report," she said. "They want him registered." Snape's lip curled. "They want him controlled," he said. Dumbledore read his letter and sighed softly, like someone had just knocked over a chess piece he liked. "Ah," he murmured, "how predictable." And so, as if summoned by the idea of control, Dolores Umbridge appeared at Hogwarts only days later. She arrived in pink. She smiled like a kitten. Her eyes were flat. When she first met Alucard, it was in the entrance hall. Students watched from the staircase. Teachers stood stiff. Umbridge held papers like weapons. "My dear," Umbridge said, voice sweet, "the ministry must ensure the safety of our children." Alucard looked at her and smiled slowly. "You smell like fear," he said. Umbridge's smile twitched. "How rude," she said lightly. "But I'm sure we can be civil." Alucard leaned closer, just enough to make her step back without meaning to. "Civil as a mask," he said. "You like masks." Umbridge's laugh was too high. "We will have rules," she said. Alucard nodded once, like he agreed. "You will try," he said. McGonagall stepped between them like a blade. "You will not speak to him alone," she said to Umbridge. Umbridge smiled wider. "Professor McGonagall," she said, "this is not your decision." Dumbledore's voice drifted in. "It is, actually," he said. Umbridge's eyes tightened, but she kept smiling. Alucard watched all of it, like a man watching a play. Then he looked at the grand staircase and spoke as if he was commenting on furniture. "This castle has good taste," he said. Ron, watching from above, whispered, "I hate him." Harry didn't answer. He wasn't sure if he hated Alucard. He was sure he didn't understand him. That week became a strange new normal. Alucard stayed in a room in an old tower that most students didn't use. Portraits complained about him. Doors shut themselves when he walked by. He broke curfew twice on the first night. Filch caught him on the third floor and started to shout. Then Filch looked up into red eyes and forgot how to make words. Alucard stepped around him and said politely, "Good evening." Filch fainted. The next day, McGonagall tried to give Alucard a lecture about curfew. Alucard listened with perfect attention. He nodded at the right times. He even said, "I understand." Then that night, he broke curfew again. Not because he forgot, because he wanted to see what would happen. Snape followed him once, silent as a shadow. He watched Alucard walk down a corridor, pause at a door marked "Restricted Section," and smile. Alucard didn't open it. He simply placed his hand on the wood and listened, like he could hear the books breathing. Snape stepped out of the darkness. "Don't," he said. Alucard turned slowly. "Or what?" he asked. Snape's wand was in his hand, steady. "Or we learn how difficult you want to be," he said. Alucard's smile sharpened. "That," he said, "is the first honest thing you've said to me." He walked away without opening the door. Snape stood there, jaw tight, wondering if that was mercy or mockery. Far away, in a place where light died fast, Voldemort lifted his head. The air around him felt wrong, not because of pain, like Harry's scar, because of scent, because of a new presence in the world, something old. Something that tasted like death, that refused to finish. His red eyes narrowed. "Tell me," Voldemort whispered to the empty room. "What are you?" Nagini shifted on the stone floor. In the shadows, a Death Eater knelt, shaking. "My lord," the man said, voice thin. "There are rumors at Hogwarts." "Not rumors," Voldemort hissed. "Facts. The Death Eater swallowed. A creature, he said. Not a wizard. Not a student. It killed spiders without spells. Voldemort's mouth curled, not in joy, but in interest. Immortality, he murmured. He did not order an attack, not yet. First, he would learn what kind of immortal this was, because there was only room for one thing that lived forever and ruled the dark. The uneasy peace did not last. It broke on a night when the sky was thick with clouds and the wind pushed hard against the towers. Harry was half asleep when he felt it. Not a scar pain, a cold, a deep, soaking cold that pressed into his bones like ice water. He sat up, heart hammering. Ron groaned. Hermione was already awake, eyes wide in the dark. "Do you feel that?" she whispered. The air in the dorm room felt heavy, like someone had opened a door to winter. From far below, a scream echoed down a stairwell. Then another. Harry swung his legs out of bed. "It's Dementors," he said, and his voice came out rough. Ron's face went pale. "Here?" Hermione grabbed her wand. "They shouldn't be able to get in," she said fast. "The wards." The cold got worse. They ran. In the common room, students were stumbling out, frightened and confused. Some were crying. Some were shaking. The fire in the hearth flickered as if it was losing a fight. Percy would have tried to organize them, but Percy wasn't there. So it was chaos. And then the portrait started shouting. "They're outside! They're on the grounds! They're coming!" Harry pushed through the crowd and burst into the corridor. The cold hit him harder. He could feel it now like a pressure on his chest. It was fear. Not his fear, exactly. A hunger for fear. Dementors. He ran down the stairs with Ron and Hermione close behind. The corridors were filling with students and teachers. Professor McGonagall's voice snapped like a whip. "Back to your common rooms," she shouted. "All of you!" A student sobbed. "I can't breathe!" Professor Flitwick was already casting warm, bright spells that lit the hall. Then the front doors blew open like something had shoved them. A wave of cold rolled in, and with it, black shapes. They floated, tall and thin, cloaked like shadows with hands like dead branches. Their faces were hidden. Their presence pulled joy out of the air. Students screamed. Harry's legs tried to stop moving all on their own. Then he heard a sound that did not belong. A laugh. Low, smooth, amused. Harry's head snapped to the side. Alucard stood in the entrance hall, hands in his coat pockets, like he had been waiting for a party. His red eyes tracked the Dementors. "Ah," he said softly. "These ones are empty." McGonagall spun. "Alucard!" she barked. "Get back!" Alucard didn't even look at her. "They're hungry," he said, "and they think this place is weak." One Dementor drifted forward toward a group of first years huddled behind Flitwick. The air around it turned colder. The kids started to cry harder, their faces slack with fear. Harry's stomach clenched. He pushed forward, wand up. "Expecto Patronum!" he shouted. Silver light burst from his wand, forming the shape of a stag. It charged, and the Dementor recoiled. More Dementors glided in behind it. Harry's Patronus flickered. There were too many. The cold pressed down. Harry's mind flashed with screaming. A woman's voice. His mother. He stumbled. Hermione grabbed his arm. "Harry!" she cried. Ron's voice shook. "Do it again!" he yelled. "Come on!" Harry tried. His wand hand trembled. Then Alucard moved. Not fast like a wizard. Fast like something that did not care about space. One moment he was in the hall. The next, he was between the Dementors and the children, coat swaying as if he had all the time in the world. He looked up at the nearest Dementor and smiled like it had finally said something interesting. The Dementor reached for him. Its hand passed into Alucard's coat like his body wasn't fully solid. Harry expected Alucard to flinch. He didn't. Alucard leaned forward slightly, as if he was letting it try. The Dementor's hood tilted. It sensed something inside him. Not one soul. Many. A crowd. Bound, hunger meeting. Bound, hunger. The Dementor pulled back like it had touched fire. Alucard's smile widened. "Yes," he murmured, almost pleased. "You can taste it." McGonagall's eyes widened, just for a second, because she understood what that meant. Whatever Alucard was, he was not a simple vampire. He was a prison full of souls, and the Dementors wanted every single one. Alucard lifted his hand. The shadows under the Dementors stretched out again. But this time, it wasn't just hands. It was a wave. A black tide that rolled across the stone floor and climbed the walls. The Dementors drifted higher, trying to avoid it. The shadow rose with them. It wrapped around their cloaks. It pulled. Not to kill. Not to tear. To hold. To drag them down and pin them like insects in a web. Students stared, mouths open. Even teachers paused. "Back," Snape shouted, voice sharp. "Everyone back!" Snape stood near the side, wand already moving. He was not wasting time trying to understand. He was already trying to survive it. He fired a silver Patronus, too, smaller than Harry's, but strong and controlled. It shoved a Dementor away from a fallen student. Flitwick cast bright spells that lit up the hall like lightning. McGonagall's transfiguration snapped benches into barriers, desks into shields. Dumbledore appeared at the top of the staircase, and the air shifted. The cold did not vanish. Dementors don't vanish because someone walks in. But the castle felt less helpless. Dumbledore's wand lifted. A warm, steady light spread out, not flashy, just powerful. Like the sun had decided to take one step closer. The Dementors hesitated. Alucard laughed softly. "Now that," he said, looking up at Dumbledore, "is a proper guardian." Dumbledore's eyes stayed calm, but they were focused on Alucard too, like he was keeping two storms in mind at once. Then something cracked outside. A loud boom. Stone chips flew through the open doors. A dark spell hit the entrance steps. Death Eaters. Harry's blood turned cold in a different way. Figures in masks appeared beyond the doorway, moving fast, using the Dementors as cover. One of them shouted, "Now!" Spells shot into the hall. Red, green, purple. They hit barriers and bounced. A suit of armor shattered. Students screamed again. McGonagall roared, "To the side corridors! Move!" Teachers formed a line, pushing students away from the front. Harry's instincts screamed at him to fight. But Dumbledore's earlier words echoed in his head. "You will not involve yourself." Harry gritted his teeth and held his wand up anyway. Hermione and Ron did the same. Alucard turned his head slowly toward the Death Eaters. His smile faded. For the first time, he looked annoyed. "Children behind you," he said to the teachers, as if reminding them of something simple. Snape barked, "We know." Alucard's eyes flashed redder. "Then stop letting them shoot," he said. He stepped forward. A killing curse flew straight toward him. It hit his chest. For a half second, Alucard's coat tore. His body split like smoke ripped apart. Harry's breath caught. Then Alucard's body reformed in the same step. The spell had done something. It had mattered. It had killed a part of him. But he was still there. He looked down at his chest like someone noticing a stain. Then he looked up at the Death Eaters. "Oh," he said softly. "You have sharp toys." He vanished. He didn't apparate. There was no crack, no pop. He simply was not in that spot anymore. One Death Eater jerked, as if grabbed from behind. He lifted off the ground, choking. His feet kicked in the air. A shadow hand held him up by the throat. Alucard stood behind him now, close enough to whisper. "You should not bring war into a school," Alucard said. The Death Eater tried to raise his wand. A shadow snapped the wand in half. Alucard tossed the man aside like a broken doll. He hit the stone floor and didn't move. Harry stared, shocked. Alucard moved again, a blur of red coat and black shadow. He didn't throw spells. He didn't need to. He used the space like it belonged to him. He was above, behind, between. Death Eaters tried to form a line. Alucard broke the line. One of them fired a curse at a student by mistake. McGonagall's face went wild with rage. She blocked it and sent the attacker flying into a wall with a crack like thunder. Flitwick's voice squeaked, "You will not," and his spells hit like punches. Snape dueled like a man who had done this too many times. He moved clean, never wasting motion, eyes always counting exits. Dumbledore stepped forward at last, and the hall seemed to bend around his presence. He raised his wand once. The stone floor rippled like water and rose into a wall, cutting off the entrance. No more Death Eaters could come in. The ones inside realized they were trapped. Alucard smiled again. "Now you understand," he said. A Dementor, freed from one shadow grip, drifted toward Alucard's back. Its hood lowered. It tried to take. Alucard's shoulders stiffened, just slightly. Not fear. Awareness. Harry saw it. The Dementor wasn't hurting him like a normal person. It was pulling at the deep thing inside him, at the bound souls. Alucard's smile thinned. "Greedy," he muttered. He lifted his hand, and his shadow opened like a mouth. A wave of darkness surged up and wrapped the Dementor fully. It didn't tear it apart. It crushed it down into the floor like pushing a sheet into a drawer and slamming it shut. The Dementor vanished from sight, trapped under shadow like a lid. Hermione's voice shook. Can he capture them?" Ron whispered. "I don't care. I just want them gone." Harry's Patronus flickered again, but he forced it stronger. The stag stamped and charged, pushing Dementors back toward the open air. Dumbledore's light grew warmer, spreading across the entrance hall and out into the night. The Dementors outside began to drift back, reluctant, like wolves pushed away from a fire. But not all of them. Some resisted. Some hovered at the edge, as if waiting for a signal. A sharp whistle cut through the chaos. A Death Eater near the wall threw something small onto the floor. It was a glass orb with dark lines on it. The orb cracked, and a ring of sickly light spread out on the stone. Hermione's eyes widened. "A ward trap!" she shouted. Alucard looked down at it, curious. The ring flared. For a moment. The shadows around Alucard twitched, like they hit a fence. Alucard's eyes narrowed. The Death Eater shouted, "Now! Take a sample!" Another Death Eater rushed in, holding a small bottle with a needle-like point, trying to jab it into Alucard's arm. It was a stupid move. Alucard's hand shot out and caught the Death Eater by the wrist, not hard enough to rip it off, hard enough to stop it like a steel clamp. Alucard leaned close. "That," he said, "was brave." The Death Eater trembled. Alucard twisted the wrist. The bottle clinked and fell. It rolled across the floor. Then Alucard let go and stepped away, because he didn't need to keep holding him. The Death Eater fell to his knees, clutching his hand. Snape saw the bottle and flicked his wand. It shot into his palm. His eyes narrowed as he inspected it. "They came prepared," he hissed. Dumbledore's gaze hardened. "Yes," he said quietly. "They did." The trapped Death Eaters panicked now. They fired spells at the stone wall Dumbledore made. The wall didn't break. It didn't even crack. Dumbledore turned his head slightly, almost tired. "Enough," he said. His wand moved once. The air snapped. A force swept through the hall like a giant invisible hand. Death Eaters were lifted, wands ripped away, Bodies slammed down to the floor in neat lines. Not dead, just helpless. McGonagall's shoulders rose and fell as she breathed hard. "Aurors!" she snapped, voice shaking with anger. "Now!" They were already coming. The castle's alarms had rung. The Dementors outside drifted back farther, as if whoever had sent them decided the moment was over. Harry watched them retreat into the dark like stains sliding away. The cold eased. Not gone, but less. His hand still shook. Alucard stood near the entrance, looking out at the night. His coat was torn in one spot. It was already mending. The fabric seemed to knit itself back together, like it didn't accept damage either. He turned his head toward Dumbledore. "So," he said, voice light, "your enemies use hunger to soften you, then knives to cut." Dumbledore's eyes stayed steady. "Yes," he said. Alucard's smile returned, slow and pleased. "Good," he said. "They have manners." McGonagall stared at him like she wanted to hex him into next week. "Manners?" she repeated. Alucard looked at her. "They announced themselves," he said. "They tried to steal instead of screaming like animals. I respect effort." Hermione whispered to Harry, "He's insane." Harry couldn't stop staring at Alucard. Alucard had taken a killing curse and kept walking. He had trapped Dementors like they were bugs in a jar, and he was smiling like Hogwarts was the most fun place he had visited in years. Snape stepped up beside Dumbledore, voice low. "This changes everything," he said. Dumbledore did not look away from Alucard. "Yes," he replied. "It does." Alucard tilted his head, listening. Far away beyond the grounds, a faint sound carried on the wind. Not words, not laughter, a whisper in magic, a sense of being watched. Alucard's eyes narrowed just a little, as if he could taste the watcher. Then he smiled again, sharp and eager. "Someone out there," he murmured, "thinks he is the king of monsters." Dumbledore's voice was quiet. "And you?" he asked. Alucard's red eyes gleamed. "I think," he said, "that he has not met me yet." That same night, in a dark room far from Hogwarts, Voldemort listened to a kneeling Death Eater speak through chattering teeth. "My lord," the man whispered, "we saw it. We saw him. The creature. He took the killing curse and returned. The Dementors. He held them." Voldemort's fingers tapped slowly on the arm of his chair, not angry, thinking. "And the bottle?" Voldemort asked softly. The Death Eater swallowed. "We failed," he admitted. "Snape took it." Voldemort's eyes narrowed. "Snape," he murmured. Then his mouth curved in a thin smile. "Still," Voldemort said, voice smooth. "We learned." He stood, and the shadows in the room seemed to lean toward him. "There is an immortal at Hogwarts," he said. "Not mine. Not Dumbledore's." His voice turned colder. "So we will not fight him like a man," Voldemort whispered. "We will test him like a lock." Nagini slid closer, tongue flicking. Voldemort's eyes burned. "And when the lock has a key," he said, "we will decide who holds it." Back at Hogwarts, the students were herded into safer halls, lights brighter, fires stronger. Teachers stood guard. The castle hummed with alarm and anger. Alucard walked the corridor as if nothing happened. Filch appeared again, pale and shaking, pointing a bony finger. "Curfew," he squeaked. "Curfew!" Alucard stopped and looked at him. He sighed like a man being bothered by a fly. Then, very politely, he said, "You are correct." Filch blinked. Alucard turned around and walked the other way. Filch stared after him, confused and proud, as if he had just won a battle. And far above, in the headmaster's office, Dumbledore watched the night through the window and understood the simple truth. Hogwarts had survived Voldemort for years, but now it had something else inside its walls, a guest who could become a guardian or become a disaster. And the world outside had just learned that Hogwarts was no longer the only thing that mattered in the war. By sunrise, Hogwarts looked normal again. That was the problem. The stones were still standing. The portraits were still complaining. The Great Hall still served breakfast like it always did. But everyone's hands shook when they lifted their cups. Students kept glancing at the doors. They kept listening for cold. Professor McGonagall stood at the staff table like a guard tower. Her voice was sharp and tired as she spoke to the teachers in quick bursts. Extra patrols. No one goes near the grounds without an escort. Lock the side entrances. Keep the younger ones close. Professor Flitwick's little hands trembled as he poured tea. Dementors, he said quietly, inside our gates. Snape did not sit. He stood with his arms crossed and his eyes half-lidded, like he wanted to turn into stone so nothing could touch him. In his hand, hidden by his sleeve, he still held the small bottle the Death Eater had dropped. A sample bottle. A tool meant to steal something from a creature they did not understand. Snape's jaw tightened. Across the hall, Alucard sat at a long table that had been cleared in a hurry. Students stared at him like he was a new kind of curse. He didn't mind. He ate nothing. He didn't even pretend to. He simply watched the room, smiling as if the fear was background music. When a group of Ravenclaws whispered too loudly, Alucard looked at them. They froze. Then he looked away, bored again. Harry tried not to stare. He failed. He couldn't stop seeing it in his head. The killing curse hitting Alucard. Alucard tearing apart like smoke, then coming back like the spell had been a rude tap on the shoulder. Harry had grown up hearing that the killing curse was final. Now he knew that final was not true for everyone. Hermione sat with her books already open, even though it was breakfast. She wasn't eating either. She was writing notes so fast her quill squeaked. Ron pushed eggs around his plate. "I'm never sleeping again," he muttered. Hermione did not look up. "You will sleep," she said. "And you will stop complaining." Ron stared at her. "You're not scared?" he asked. Hermione's hand paused. Her voice softened just a little. "I am scared," she said. "That's why I'm working." Harry looked down at his hands. He was scared too. But it wasn't only fear. It was a loud question that wouldn't shut up. Is he on our side? Or was that a silly idea to begin with? By lunch, the letters came. Owls hammered the windows like someone had thrown stones. They poured into the Great Hall in a flood of feathers and parchment. Students grabbed their mail, then the noise started. "My mom says I'm coming home. My dad says Hogwarts isn't safe. They said there was a monster." McGonagall's lips pressed into a thin line. She did not need to read the letters to know what they said. The Daily Prophet arrived too. It was tossed onto the staff table by a nervous owl. The headline took up half the front page in thick black letters. "Dementor attack at Hogwarts! Headmaster hides dangerous unknown creature." There was a moving picture beneath it. It showed the castle gates at night, with a dark blur near the entrance. The blur looked like a tall man in red. The paper called him a foreign predator. It called Dumbledore reckless. It called the students at risk. McGonagall crumpled the paper in her fist so hard the ink smeared. "Lies," she said through clenched teeth. Snape's eyes flicked over the headline once, then away. "Not lies," he said coldly. "A plan." Dumbledore sat with his hands folded, calm in a way that made it worse. He looked at the frightened students, and then at the teachers. "The Ministry will come," he said. It was not a guess. It was a fact. Dolores Umbridge arrived 2 days later with a wagon of pink luggage and a smile that did not reach her eyes. She brought oars. She brought papers with seals. She brought the smell of control. Harry watched from behind a pillar as she walked into the entrance hall like she owned it. Her heels clicked on the stone like tiny hammers. Dumbledore waited for her at the foot of the staircase. McGonagall stood beside him, rigid. Snape stood a step back, as if he refused to stand too close to anything sweet. Umbridge clasped her hands. "Headmaster," she said in a sing-song voice, "what a dreadful situation. The Ministry is simply sick with worry." Dumbledore smiled politely. "How kind," he said. Umbridge's smile sharpened. "I am here to ensure the safety of the children," she continued, "and to assess the creature you are keeping." McGonagall's voice cut in. "He is a guest," she said. Umbridge gave a little laugh. "A guest," she repeated, as if McGonagall had said something adorable. "Professor, guests don't survive killing curses." McGonagall went still. Dumbledore's eyes stayed calm. "No," he agreed. "They don't." Umbridge leaned forward slightly. "Then we must treat this as an emergency," she said. "This being must be registered, examined, and—" A voice from the shadows behind them finished the sentence. "Caged," Alucard said. Umbridge jumped. She recovered fast, but her eyes flashed. She turned and smiled wider than before. Alucard strolled into the light, hands in his coat pockets, as if he had been listening the whole time because he had. "How wonderful," Umbridge cooed. "You must be the visitor." Alucard looked at her like she was a tiny insect that had learned to speak. "You smell like ink," he said. Umbridge's smile twitched. "I beg your pardon." "You write rules," Alucard said. "And you enjoy it." Umbridge's cheeks pinked. "Rules are what keep us civilized," she said. Alucard leaned closer, just enough to make the Aurors tense. "Civilized people don't send hungry ghosts into schools," he said softly. The entrance hall went quiet. Umbridge's smile did not break. It just turned colder. "That was not the Ministry," she said quickly. "The Dementors are under Ministry authority, yes, but you lost them," Alucard said, like a child dropping a knife. McGonagall's wand hand tightened. She looked ready to explode. Dumbledore spoke gently. "Dolores," he said, "Alucard has agreed to specific rules while he remains here." Umbridge clasped her hands again. "Splendid," she said. "Then he will have no issue meeting Ministry standards." Alucard's red eyes gleamed. "Standards?" he repeated, amused. "Do you measure monsters with rulers?" Umbridge's voice stayed sweet. "We measure threats," she corrected. Alucard smiled. "Then measure me," he said. "Stand close." One Auror took a half-step forward, then stopped, because something in Alucard's gaze made his body refuse. Umbridge's smile stiffened. Dumbledore's voice stayed soft, but firm. "There will be no examinations," he said. "Not here. Not without my consent." Umbridge's eyes narrowed. "Headmaster," she said, "you are obstructing the Ministry." Dumbledore nodded once. "Yes," he said pleasantly. For a moment, Umbridge looked like she might snap. Then she breathed in and returned to her smile. "Very well," she said. "If you will not cooperate, we will observe." She turned to her Aurors. "Postguards," she said, quietly, "for the children." McGonagall's eyes burned. "This is my school," she snapped. Umbridge patted the air as if soothing her. "Of course it is," she said. "For now." Alucard watched Umbridge walk away like he was watching a snake crawl into a child's bed. Then he looked at Dumbledore. "You let her in," he said. Dumbledore's eyes did not change. "Sometimes," he said, "a door opened is better than a door broken." Alucard's smile returned. "That is a pretty way to say politics," he said. Dumbledore did not deny it. That evening, Hermione found Harry in the library. She had a stack of books so tall, it looked like it might fall and crush her. Her face was pale with excitement and stress. "I found something," she whispered. Ron leaned over the table. "If it's another thing about vampires and garlic, I'm leaving." Hermione ignored him. She pushed a book toward Harry. "This is a record of ministry departments," she said. "Old ones. Some are hidden. Some are classified." Harry frowned. "Why are you reading that?" Hermione's eyes flashed. "Because I listened," she said. "After the attack, Professor Snape and Professor McGonagall were arguing. Snape said the Dementors weren't the real problem." Ron swallowed. "What was the real problem?" Hermione tapped the page. "He said the real problem is that this Alucard isn't just hard to kill," she said. "He's full of something. Like a crowd inside him." Harry felt a chill. He remembered the Dementor pulling back from Alucard like it had tasted something awful and huge. Hermione lowered her voice even more. "There are places in the wizarding world that deal with the deepest kinds of magic," she said. "Magic that touches souls, life, death." Ron's mouth went dry. "That sounds like the worst kind." Hermione nodded. "The Department of Mysteries," she said. Harry's stomach tightened. He remembered the Order talking in whispers. He remembered names like the Hall of Prophecy. Hermione looked at him hard. "If Voldemort wants to understand Alucard," she said, "he'll look there. And if Alucard wants to understand this world," she hesitated, "he might go there too." Ron shook his head. "Why would he?" he whispered. Hermione's eyes flicked toward the window, toward the darkening sky. "Because Dementors tried to feed on him," she said, "and he wasn't afraid. He was interested." Harry didn't like how true that felt. Hermione grabbed her quill again. "Also," she added, "his name, Alucard. It's strange. It's like—" She flipped her notes, frowning. "It's like it's hiding something." Ron blinked. "Like what?" Hermione looked up. "Like it's backwards," she said slowly. Harry stared. The pieces clicked in his head, but he didn't know where they belonged. Behind them, in a far corner of the library, a shadow stretched a little longer than it should have. Someone was listening. Snape did not sleep much either. He stood in his office with the sample bottle on his desk. He had examined it with spells. He had checked it with potions. He had sniffed it like he could smell the plan. It was not simple poison. It was a container designed to hold essence, a fragment, a trace. It was designed by someone who understood that the creature in Hogwarts could not be fought like a normal man. Snape's eyes narrowed. He thought of Umbridge's smile. He thought of Voldemort's cleverness. Then he thought of Dumbledore's calm. Snape's mouth tightened. He hated being right. But he was often right. Someone was going to try to take Alucard apart without touching his skin. And Hogwarts was full of children who would stand too close to the knife. In the forest of his own mind, Voldemort sat like a spider in the center of a web. He did not rage about failure. He did not shout. He smiled. "The castle has gained a beast," he murmured to Bellatrix, who stood like a loyal flame beside him. "And beasts can be led." Bellatrix's eyes shone. "Let me go," she begged. "Let me cut it. Let me see it scream." Voldemort lifted one finger. Bellatrix froze, shivering with excitement and fear. "No," Voldemort said softly. "Not yet." He rose and paced slowly. "Killing it is waste," he said. "Chaining it is work. But learning its shape," he tilted his head, "that is power." He looked at a table where old books lay open. Not children's books, not school books. Books of deep magic. "There are places where the world's rules are stored," Voldemort whispered. Rooms where death is not a story, where it is a door. Bellatrix leaned forward. "The department," she breathed. Voldemort smiled at her like she was a favorite knife. "Yes," he said. Then his voice dropped, smooth and sharp. "Send a message," he ordered. "Not to the headmaster. Not to the boy." Bellatrix blinked, confused. "To who?" "My lord?" Voldemort's smile widened. "To the monster," he said. The message arrived the next night in a way that made even the portraits hush. Harry was walking back to Gryffindor Tower with Ron and Hermione after a late study session. They weren't supposed to be out. That was the usual problem. "This is your fault," Ron hissed. "If Filch catches us," Hermione snapped. "Stop talking!" They turned a corner and stopped dead. Alucard stood in the middle of the hallway, blocking the path like he had been placed there on purpose. His coat was neat. His eyes were bright. He looked at their faces and smiled as if he had been expecting them. "Curfew," Ron blurted, pointing like that would help. Alucard glanced at Ron's finger. "Yes," he said. "You're breaking it." Hermione swallowed. "What do you want?" she asked. Alucard's smile sharpened. "Someone sent me a letter," he said. Harry's heart jumped. "Who?" he demanded. Alucard looked at Harry like he was enjoying the reaction. "A man with no nose and too much pride," he said simply. Hermione went pale. Ron made a small choking sound. Harry's voice went hard. "Voldemort!" Alucard's eyes gleamed. "So that's his name," he said, pleased. "He writes like a king." Hermione forced herself to speak. "What did it say?" she asked. Alucard lifted a finger. The air near his coat pocket moved. A folded parchment slid out as if pulled by invisible hands. It hovered between them. Harry stared at it. It had no owl marks, no wax seal. It looked like it had simply appeared. Alucard did not hand it over. He let it hover just out of reach. "It says," Alucard murmured, "that he knows places where death can be touched." Hermione's eyes snapped to Alucard's face. "He's tempting you," she whispered. Alucard smiled wider. "Yes," he agreed. "It's polite." Harry stepped forward, anger rising. "You can't listen to him," he snapped. "He lies." Alucard's eyes slid over Harry's face. "Everyone lies," he said. "You lie when you say you're not curious." Harry's mouth opened, then shut. Hermione's voice shook. "What do you want from death?" she asked. Alucard's smile faded slightly. For the first time, he looked less like a joke and more like an old, tired thing. "I want to know if it's real here," he said quietly. The hallway felt colder, even without Dementors. Harry clenched his fists. "If you go to the Ministry, it's a trap," he said. Alucard shrugged. "Then it will be entertaining," he said. Hermione's eyes flashed. "Entertaining?" she whispered. Alucard looked at her. "You live in a war," he said. "But you pretend it's school. I respect the denial. It's cute." Ron's voice squeaked. "We are not cute." Alucard ignored him and turned away as if the conversation was done. He began to walk down the corridor toward the stairs that led out. Hermione's face tightened. She looked at Harry. Harry knew that look. It meant, if we let him go alone, we might never get the chance to fix what happens next. It also meant, we are about to break more rules. Ron's eyes went wide. "No," he whispered. "Absolutely not." Harry took one step after Alucard anyway. Hermione followed. Ron groaned like his soul was leaving his body. "I hate you both," he muttered, and followed too. Behind them, a portrait whispered, "Idiots," with deep feeling. And above them, somewhere in the castle, Dumbledore's instruments clicked faster than usual. The night air outside Hogwarts was sharp and wet. Alucard stood at the edge of the grounds, as if he was choosing a direction on a map. He did not carry a wand. He did not carry a broom. He did not even look like he was planning to travel. Harry stayed back behind a hedge with Hermione and Ron, using Harry's invisibility cloak pulled tight over them. They were pressed together so close, Ron kept silently shaking his head like he couldn't believe his life. Hermione's whisper was fierce. "We are not letting him walk into a trap alone," she said. Ron whispered back, "We are 3 children in a hedge. We are the trap." Harry didn't answer. He watched Alucard. Alucard lifted his hand, and his shadow stretched out across the grass like a long black road. Then he stepped into it. For a moment he was gone, like the world had swallowed him. Hermione's breath caught. He didn't apparate," she whispered. Harry felt it in his skin. It was magic, but not like spells. It was like the night itself moved when he wanted. Harry swallowed. "Come on," he whispered. He pulled the cloak tighter and moved forward. They ran across the grounds, keeping to dark spots, staying low. At the edge of the trees, Harry paused. His chest hurt from breathing too fast. Hermione whispered, "How are we supposed to follow him?" Ron hissed, "We're not!" Then a cold wind pushed through the branches. A whisper brushed Harry's ear, even though no one was there. "Flew." Hermione froze. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Harry's blood went cold. "Yeah," he breathed. They turned slowly. Alucard stood behind them like he had been there the whole time. His eyes were amused. "You're loud," he said. Ron yelped and nearly tripped over his own feet. Hermione's face went red under the cloak. "We're trying to stop you from dying," Alucard finished. He smiled. "Adorable." Harry stepped out from under the cloak. "If you go," he said, voice shaking with anger, "you put everyone in danger." Alucard looked at him for a long moment. Then he leaned down slightly, close enough that Harry could see the tiny cracks of oldness in his eyes. "You think you're responsible for everything," Alucard said softly. "That's a heavy chain." Harry swallowed hard. Alucard straightened. "Fine," he said. "Come, it will be educational." Hermione blinked. "You're letting us come?" Alucard shrugged. "If you die, that's your choice," he said. "If you survive, you learn." Ron stared at him like he wanted to cry. Alucard turned toward the castle. "Fireplace," he said. Harry's heart jumped. "We can't," he whispered. "The flu network is watched." Alucard smiled. "Then they will watch," he said. "And then they will panic." He began walking. Harry hesitated only a second. Then he followed, because he already knew the truth. Rules were not going to stop this night. The Ministry of Magic was bright, busy, and full of people who thought they were safe because they were underground. Harry had been there before. He hated it every time. They arrived through a side flue connection Hermione knew about from reading too much. It was not meant for students. It was meant for staff deliveries and repairs. They stepped out into a small fireplace in a dull hallway. Harry pulled the cloak tight again over the 3 of them. Hermione held Ron's sleeve so he wouldn't bolt. Alucard stepped out last and dusted ash from his coat like he was annoyed by dirt. The hallway lights flickered. Harry felt the air shift, like invisible eyes turned toward them. Anti-intruder magic. Security spells. Alucard's smile returned. "You can feel them, can't you?" Hermione whispered, amazed. Alucard looked at her. "Your world is full of cages," he said. "You just call them laws." They moved quietly down the corridor. Harry's heart pounded as they passed doors labeled with gold letters. Improper use of magic office, magical accidents, and catastrophes. Ron whispered, "Why are we here again?" Hermione whispered back, "Because he wants the Department of Mysteries." Ron whispered, "And why do we want that?" Harry didn't answer. His mouth was dry. They turned a corner. 2 Aurors stood ahead, talking. Their wands hung at their sides, but their posture was alert. Harry froze. Hermione whispered, "Back." Alucard did not back up. He walked forward. The Aurors looked up. One of them opened his mouth to speak. Alucard lifted one finger. The lights above them dimmed, just for a second, like the shadows leaned in. The Aurors' eyes widened. Their bodies stopped moving. Not because Alucard stunned them, because their minds said, "Danger," and their muscles listened. Alucard walked between them like he was passing statues. He did not hurt them. He did not need to. Harry, Hermione, and Ron slipped by under the cloak, shaking. Ron's whisper was frantic. "He just scared them into freezing." Hermione's whisper was tight. "That's worse." Alucard kept going, calm as ever. Then the hallway ended at a heavy door. It was plain. No big sign, no warning. Just a cold feeling that made Harry's stomach twist. Hermione's eyes fixed on the door. "That's it," she breathed. "The department." Alucard placed his hand on the door. The door did not open. Alucard smiled slowly. "Good luck," he murmured. Then the shadows at his feet rose and slid under the crack like liquid. A click sounded from inside. The door swung open. Hermione's breath caught in her throat. "That shouldn't." Alucard glanced back at her. "Rules," he said lightly, "are for the living." He stepped through. Harry followed, and the air inside felt different. Not colder. Deeper. Like the place was listening. The Department of Mysteries was quiet in a way that hurt the ears. Rows of doors stood in a circle, each leading to a room with its own strange rules. Harry remembered that much. This time, the place felt even more wrong because Alucard was there. Alucard looked around slowly, red eyes taking in every door. His smile was gone. He looked focused. Hermione's mind screamed at her to leave, but her feet didn't move. Her curiosity was too strong, and she hated that about herself. Alucard walked toward one door and paused. He tilted his head. "Time," he said softly, like he could taste it. He moved to another. "Thought," he murmured. Then he stopped at a door that made the hair on Hermione's arms rise. He stared at it for a long moment. "Death," he said. Harry felt his throat tighten. He knew that door. He remembered the room with the archway and the curtain that moved like there was always wind. The veil. Hermione whispered, "We shouldn't." Ron whispered, "We really shouldn't." Alucard reached for the handle. The door opened by itself. Hermione's breath caught. "It recognized him," she whispered, shocked. Harry whispered, "Or it wants him." They stepped into the death chamber. The room was round and shadowy. Stone benches rose in steps. In the center stood an old stone archway with a thin black curtain hanging from it. The curtain moved gently, even though the air felt still. Harry's chest tightened. He could hear whispers near it. Not words he understood, just sound that made him feel sad and empty. Alucard walked toward it like a man walking toward a mirror. His steps slowed. His shoulders tightened. For the first time since he arrived at Hogwarts, Hermione saw something like caution in him. Not fear. Respect. The curtain moved. The whispers grew louder in Harry's ears. Ron grabbed Hermione's sleeve. "We're leaving," he hissed. Hermione did not move. Her eyes were locked on Alucard. Alucard stopped 3 steps away from the veil. He breathed in. Then he smiled slightly, but it wasn't his usual sharp grin. It was small, almost quiet. "So it's real," he murmured. Harry's voice came out rough. "What is?" he asked. Alucard didn't look back. "An end," he said. Hermione swallowed. "You want to die?" she whispered, horrified. Alucard chuckled softly. "No," he said. I want to know if I can." That sentence made Hermione's stomach turn, because it wasn't brave. It was not a hero's question. It was a predator checking the only thing that might stop it. Alucard lifted his hand toward the curtain. The whispers changed. They grew sharp, like hungry mouths. The curtain pulled, just slightly, toward his fingers. Harry's heart slammed. "Don't touch it," he shouted. Alucard paused. He turned his head just enough to look at Harry out of the corner of his eye. "Why?" he asked. Calm. Harry swallowed. His voice shook. "Because it took someone I cared about," he said. Alucard's expression shifted. A tiny change. A flicker of interest that wasn't cruel. "Ah," he said softly. "So you've seen it eat." Hermione stepped forward, voice tight. "This place is not a toy," she said. Alucard's smile returned, but it was thin. "Neither am I," he said. And then the trap sprung. A ring of light flared around the archway, spreading across the floor like a net. Hermione gasped. "Wards!" Ron yelped. "I knew it!" The doors around the chamber slammed shut. The lights overhead dimmed, and from the shadows between the benches, masked figures stepped out. Death Eaters. Bellatrix. Lestrange's laugh cracked through the room like broken glass. "There you are," she sang. "Oh, I can feel it. I can feel you." Harry's blood went ice cold. Bellatrix turned her head slowly toward where Harry stood under the cloak, and Hermione's heart dropped. She can't see him, Hermione told herself, but Bellatrix smiled like she could smell him. Alucard did not step back. He sighed, almost bored again. "So," he said, "this is your welcome." A tall Death Eater raised his wand and shouted, "Hold!" The ward net on the floor flashed again, and for a split second, Alucard's shadow twitched like it hit a wall. Alucard looked down, curious. "Oh," he murmured, "you built a cage that bites." Bellatrix danced forward, eyes wide with joy. "My lord wants to meet you," she purred. "He wants to know what you are." Alucard's eyes gleamed. "Tell him to come," he said. Bellatrix giggled. "Not yet," she whispered. "First we take a little piece." Two Death Eaters lifted a silver chain covered in runes and swung it like a net. It flew toward Alucard's chest. Alucard didn't dodge. He let it hit. The chain wrapped around him and flashed bright. For a heartbeat, Hermione thought it worked. Then Alucard smiled. His body turned to shadow. The chain fell through him and clattered on the stone. He reformed behind the men holding it. "Good try," he said softly. He lifted one hand. Shadows rose from the floor, not just like hands now, but like a pack of dark dogs made of smoke and teeth. They lunged. The Death Eater screamed. Spells flew in panic. The room exploded into noise and light. Harry ripped off the cloak. "Expelliarmus!" he shouted, and a Death Eater's wand flew into the air. Hermione cried, "Stupefy!" and hit another in the chest. Ron yelled something that sounded like a swear and fired a curse that missed and hit a bench instead. The bench turned into a cloud of stone dust. Bellatrix shrieked with laughter, dodging like a dancer. "Little Potter," she sang, "you brought friends." Harry's wand shook. His anger rose like fire. Alucard moved through the chaos like he was the chaos. He appeared above the benches, then below them, then behind a Death Eater mid-spell. He did not throw curses. He did not need to. His shadows grabbed ankles, wrists, throats. They pinned people to stone. They dragged wands away. He was winning. Easily. And then Voldemort's real move showed itself. A Death Eater near the veil raised both hands, not a wand, and began to chant in a low, ugly rhythm. Hermione's eyes widened in fear. "That's not normal spell work," she gasped. That's a ritual." The ward net around the veil flared brighter. The curtain started to move harder, like wind had entered the room. The whispers grew louder. Alucard froze mid-step, not because someone stunned him, because something pulled at him from the inside. Hermione saw it on his face, a tightness, a slight widening of his eyes. The shadows at his feet flickered, and for the first time they looked unsure. Bellatrix clapped her hands, delighted. "Yes," she shrieked, "pull the dead out of him." Harry's stomach dropped. "What?" he shouted. Hermione's voice shook. "The Dementors," she whispered, eyes wide. They reacted to him like he had souls, like he's full of them. The veil's whispers turned hungry. Alucard's shoulders tensed. It wasn't pain like a cut, it was pressure. Like invisible hands reaching into him and trying to open a door. For a moment, the room felt crowded, like people were standing shoulder to shoulder in the air. Harry heard faint cries that weren't his. Ron whimpered. "I don't like this," he muttered. Alucard's smile was gone now. He turned slowly toward the veil. The curtain pulled toward him again. And in that moment, Hermione understood the true danger. This wasn't about killing Alucard. It was about using the only thing that could touch him. Death. Alucard took one step back, then another. Not retreating from Death Eaters, retreating from the veil. Bellatrix saw it and screamed in joy. "He's afraid," she shrieked. "He's afraid!" Alucard's head snapped toward her. His red eyes blazed. "Wrong," he said quietly. He lifted his hand toward the Death Eater, chanting the ritual. His shadow surged like a tide and slammed into the man. The chant broke. The ward net flickered. The veil's pull weakened for a second. Alucard moved fast, faster than Hermione could track. He appeared beside Bellatrix. Bellatrix gasped, delighted, like she had been kissed by danger. Alucard leaned close and spoke softly, almost kindly. "You are loud," he said. Then his shadow wrapped around her like a coat and pinned her arms. Bellatrix struggled, laughing even as fear flashed in her eyes. Alucard did not kill her. He simply tossed her across the chamber. She hit the benches hard and rolled, still laughing through a cough. Harry stared, panting. "Why didn't you?" he began. Alucard's eyes flicked to Harry. "Because she's bait," he said. And then the doors to the death chamber blew open with a crack like thunder. Not from the outside. From magic forcing its way in. Order of the Phoenix members poured through, wands raised. Tonks, Kingsley, Lupin. Their faces were hard, not surprised. Like they had been racing to a fire they knew was coming. Kingsley shouted, "Harry, get back!" Harry's heart jumped. "How did you—" "We felt it," Tonks snapped, firing a curse at a Death Eater. "Now move!" The battle shifted. The Order was trained. They fought like adults who knew what spells did to bodies. The Death Eaters were still dangerous, but now they had a real wall to hit. Alucard moved through it all like a storm with a mind, but the veil still pulled. Even with the ritual broken, it whispered. It wanted him. Alucard's gaze locked on the archway again. For a second, he looked almost thoughtful, like he was listening. Hermione took a step toward him, voice tight. "Alucard," she said. "Don't." He didn't answer. He walked closer to the veil again, slow this time. Harry's chest tightened. "What are you doing?" he shouted. Alucard's voice was low. "I'm listening," he said. The curtain moved. Alucard lifted his hand, and this time he let his fingers brush the edge of the cloth. A shock ran through the room. Hermione gasped like someone had punched her. Harry heard the whispers spike into clear sound for half a second, like 1,000 voices speaking at once. Alucard's body stiffened. His shadow flared like it was trying to fight from the inside. And then Alucard pulled his hand back fast. Not panicked, controlled, but quick. He stared at his own fingers. For the first time, he looked unsettled. Not weak, not beaten, just marked by knowledge. He looked up at the veil and smiled, small and sharp. "So," he murmured, "you can touch me." That was the scariest thing Hermione had ever heard said with interest. Kingsley shouted, "Everyone out! Now!" The order forced the Death Eaters back. The remaining Death Eaters began to retreat, throwing smoke-like spells and distractions. Bellatrix screeched, "My lord will love this!" A Death Eater threw a handful of black powder to the floor. It burst into a thick fog. Lupin grabbed Harry by the shoulder and dragged him back. "Move!" he shouted. Hermione yanked Ron by the sleeve. Ron stumbled, eyes wide and watery. Alucard didn't rush. He turned one last time toward the veil. The curtain swayed, still whispering. Alucard's eyes narrowed like he was promising it something. Then he stepped backward into his own shadow, and the darkness folded around him like a door closing. They fled into the corridors, chased by alarms and shouting voices. Behind them, deep in the Department of Mysteries, the veil continued to move. And far away, in the dark, Voldemort felt the tiniest pull of victory. Not a capture, not a chain, but proof. Proof that the monster at Hogwarts could be reached, if you used the right kind of door. Back at Hogwarts, dawn came again. The castle looked normal again, but it didn't feel normal anymore. Dumbledore stood in his office with Kingsley and McGonagall, listening to fast reports and slow fears. Snape stood near the window, silent, eyes sharp. Harry, Hermione, and Ron sat on chairs like guilty criminals. Their faces were pale and scraped. Ron looked like he might throw up if anyone spoke too loudly. McGonagall's voice trembled with anger. "You went," she said. "You went to the Ministry." Harry's mouth opened. "We had to." "No," McGonagall snapped. "You did not have to. You chose to." Hermione's voice was small. "We thought." "You thought," McGonagall repeated, and her eyes flashed. "That is the problem." Dumbledore lifted a hand. McGonagall stopped, breathing hard. Dumbledore looked at the three of them with something like sadness. "You were brave," he said quietly, "and you were reckless." Harry's throat tightened. "Voldemort set a trap," he said. "He wanted Alucard." Dumbledore nodded once. "Yes," he said. "And he learned something." Snape finally spoke, voice low. "He learned the right angle," he said. Everyone turned toward him. Snape's eyes were cold. "Not how to kill him," he said. "How to reach him." Hermione swallowed. "The veil," she whispered. Kingsley's face tightened. "That place should never have been touched," he said. Harry looked down. He remembered Alucard's fingers brushing the curtain. He remembered the sound of too many voices. He whispered, "It reacted to him." Dumbledore's eyes narrowed slightly. "Yes," he said. "It did." The room went quiet. Then the door creaked. Alucard stepped in like he belonged there. He looked perfectly fine. Too fine. His coat was clean again. His eyes were bright. He glanced at Harry, Hermione, and Ron, as if seeing them in chairs amused him. "Detention?" he asked lightly. Ron made a strangled sound. McGonagall shot to her feet. "You," she began. Alucard looked at her. "Your children followed," he said. "They are loud." Harry clenched his fists. "You led us," he snapped. Alucard's smile sharpened. "You came," he corrected. "I didn't carry you." Dumbledore watched him carefully. "What did you learn?" he asked. Alucard's smile faded a fraction. He didn't answer right away. Then he spoke, simple and clear. "I learned there is a door in your world that does not care what I am," he said. "It only cares that I end." McGonagall's face went pale. Snape's eyes narrowed. "And?" he pressed. Alucard's grin returned, but it was different now. Less playful, more hungry. "And I learned," he said softly, "that your enemy is clever." Dumbledore's voice stayed calm. "He is," he agreed. Alucard turned his head toward the window, toward the sky beyond Hogwarts. For a moment, his expression was almost quiet. Then he spoke again, like he was stating the next move on a board. "He invited me," Alucard said. "He wants to talk." Harry's stomach dropped. "Don't," he said. Voice rough. Alucard glanced at him. "You don't get to command me," he said. Harry's face flushed with anger and fear. "He'll use you," he said. Alucard's eyes glinted. "Everyone tries," he said. Dumbledore stepped forward slightly. "Alucard," he said gently, "you are free to choose your actions. But understand this. Voldemort does not want a partner." Alucard smiled. "Neither do I," he replied. Snape's voice cut in, sharp. "Then what do you want?" he demanded. Alucard's smile thinned. He looked at Snape for a long moment, and in that stare there was a cold truth. "I want meaning," he said quietly. "And your war is interesting." The word interesting made Hermione's skin crawl, because it meant their pain was entertainment to someone who could not be hurt like them. Dumbledore held Alucard's gaze, steady. "This is not a game," he said. Alucard's eyes gleamed. "For you," he said. "No." He turned toward the door. Then he paused and looked back at McGonagall. "By the way," he said, polite as anything, "your curfew is still silly." And he walked out before anyone could stop him. McGonagall's mouth opened, then shut. Ron whispered, "I hate him again." Hermione whispered, "He touched the veil." Harry stared at the door Alucard had left through and felt the truth settle in his bones. Hogwarts had a new kind of problem now. Not just Voldemort outside the walls, but an immortal inside them, who had just found the one thing that could reach him, and who seemed eager to learn what that meant. Weeks passed, and Hogwarts tried to pretend it was still just a school. The pretending was a lot of work. After the Department of Mysteries, students jumped at shadows. They flinched when owls arrived. They stopped laughing as loud in the corridors. Even the moving stairs seemed to creak more carefully. The teachers changed, too. Professor McGonagall added patrols and stricter curfews. Professor Flitwick placed tiny charm lights in the corners of dark halls. Madame Pomfrey started keeping extra calming draft ready, even though she hated giving it to kids. And the ministry did what it always did when it felt weak. It brought paperwork. Umbridge's safety rules appeared on the walls like fungus. One new decree showed up almost every day. No students near the grounds. No students near the library at night. No students in groups larger than 4 without a teacher nearby. Detentions for whispering about the visitor. Filch loved every line. He carried a little notebook now. He wrote names with the joy of a man collecting treasure. The funny part was that Filch had started trying to write Alucard's name too. It did not go well. Alucard still walked the corridors at night. Sometimes he did it loudly, with his boots tapping like he wanted everyone to know he was breaking curfew. Other nights, he vanished into the shadows so well that even portraits forgot to complain until he was already past. Filch once caught him outside the Great Hall at midnight and jabbed a shaking finger into Alucard's chest. "Curfew," Filch squeaked. "Curfew! You're out! You're—" Alucard stared down at him for a long moment. Filch stopped moving. Then Alucard gave a slow nod, like he had just been reminded of a small fact. "You are correct," Alucard said politely. He turned around and walked back the way he came. Filch blinked, stunned. Then, full of pride, he wrote in his notebook anyway. "Alucard, curfew violation complied." Filch underlined it twice. Harry heard about it the next day from Ron, who almost choked laughing. "I hate him," Ron said, wiping tears from his eyes. But that's hilarious. Hermione didn't laugh. Hermione spent her free time hunting for answers that weren't in normal books. She read everything about vampires, soul magic, ward theory, dementors, and the Department of Mysteries. She read so much she started getting headaches. Harry watched her and felt a tight knot in his chest, because Hermione was scared. And Hermione didn't like being scared. Harry was scared too, but his fear had changed shape. It used to be simple. Voldemort was the biggest danger. Now there was another truth sitting beside it. Something could survive killing curses. Something could trap dementors. Something had touched the veil and smiled like it had found a favorite puzzle. And that something was walking inside Hogwarts, where younger kids still tried to play gobstones and pretend the world wasn't burning. One afternoon, Harry saw Alucard in the corridor near the library. Alucard stood in front of a notice board, covered in Umbridge's decrees. He read them slowly. Then he took a quill from his coat pocket and wrote a neat little note beneath the newest rule. Curfew is still silly. He signed it with a simple mark, like he didn't care if anyone knew it was him. A second later, the paper ripped itself off the board and burst into little pink flames. Umbridge's magic. Alucard watched it burn without blinking. Then he smiled and walked away. Harry should have felt relief that Alucard was aiming his annoyance at Umbridge, not students. Instead, he felt dread, because the angrier the Ministry got, the more it would push, and the harder Voldemort would pull. Dumbledore watched all of it from the quiet places of the castle. Some nights he stood by his office window and looked out at the grounds. He could feel the wards like a living skin over Hogwarts. He could feel where they had been tested, where they had strained, where they had healed. He could also feel Alucard moving, not like a ghost, not like a wizard, like a pressure in the air that chose where to go. Snape came to Dumbledore's office late one evening, face tight, cloak still dusty from travel. "The Ministry is planning a containment order," Snape said without greeting. His voice was flat. But there was anger under it. "They want to remove him from the school." Dumbledore did not look surprised. "And if he refuses?" he asked gently. Snape's mouth curled. "Then they will try to force him," he said. Dumbledore's eyes stayed calm, but the air around the instruments clicked faster. "And if they try," Dumbledore said, "they may learn how small their chains are." Snape paced once. "Voldemort will use this," he said. "He already is." Dumbledore nodded. "Yes," he said. "The invitation." Snape stopped. "He told you?" he asked sharply. "He did not tell me with words," Dumbledore replied. "But the castle tells me when a storm moves through it." Snape's gaze hardened. "What is your plan?" he asked. Dumbledore's voice stayed soft. "My plan is to keep the children alive," he said simply. Snape's eyes narrowed. "That is not a plan," he snapped. "That is a wish." Dumbledore met his stare. "Then help me make it a plan," he said. Snape went still. He hated Dumbledore's calm when he was afraid, but he hated his own fear more. Snape looked away. "Alucard is not a man," he said. "He's not a student. He's not a pet. He's a weapon that chooses where to point." Dumbledore's voice was quiet. "Then we must speak to him like a person," he said. "Not like a tool." Snape's jaw tightened. "You think kindness will work?" he said. "I think honesty might," Dumbledore replied. Snape exhaled sharply through his nose. "Honesty," he repeated. "With a creature that laughs while children cry." Dumbledore's eyes softened. "Perhaps he laughs," Dumbledore said, "because he has forgotten how to do anything else." Snape looked like he wanted to argue, but he didn't. Because there was truth in that, too. Alucard's routine settled into the castle like a new shadow. He did not go to classes. He did not sit with students. He did not pretend to be harmless. But he also did not hunt. He spent long hours wandering the oldest parts of Hogwarts. He touched walls and listened. He stood near certain doors, as if he could hear the magic inside them humming. He watched the moving staircases like they were animals, and he did something that made Hermione's stomach twist. He started spending time near the hospital wing, not inside it, not near the beds, just near the door, where the smell of healing and blood was strongest. He would stand there for a minute, eyes half-lidded, then leave. Madame Pomfrey saw him once and threw a bedpan at his head. It went straight through his shoulder, like he wasn't fully solid. Alucard blinked, looked at her, and gave a polite little bow. Madame Pomfrey slammed the door in his face and shouted words Harry wasn't sure she even knew. Alucard chuckled all the way down the corridor, but when no one watched him, the laughter changed. It went quiet faster. Some nights he stood at a window and stared into the dark sky as if he was bored of stars. Other nights he stood in a shadowy corner of the castle and listened to students laugh in their common rooms, like he was trying to remember what it felt like to be young enough to believe laughter mattered. He did not look soft. He looked old. Then, one night, the invitation became more than a letter. Harry woke with a jolt, heart pounding. Not from scar pain, from a different kind of pressure. Like the castle itself had tensed. He threw on his robe and ran out. Ignoring Ron's sleepy complaint and Hermione's sharp whisper of, "Harry, wait!" They found the entrance hall empty, except for Alucard. He stood alone in the center, head tilted slightly, as if he was listening to music no one else could hear. His shadow was wrong. It stretched too far. It curled like smoke and water. Dumbledore stood at the base of the staircase, wand in hand, but not raised. McGonagall stood beside him, stiff as stone. Snape stood farther back, face pale. "Alucard," Dumbledore said quietly, "you are not alone, are you?" Alucard smiled without looking away from the empty air in front of him. "No," he said, "your king is whispering." The torches dimmed for a moment. Then the air in front of Alucard twisted. A shape formed, not fully there, like a reflection in dark glass. It did not become a full body. It became a presence. Cold, sharp, proud. Voldemort's voice slid into the hall like a knife through silk. "Alucard," it said softly. Harry's skin crawled. Hermione's breath caught. Ron made a small, choking sound. Alucard's smile widened. "There you are," he said. "I expected more drama." Voldemort's voice sounded amused. "I do not need drama," it said. "Only results." Dumbledore's eyes did not leave the twisting air. "You are not welcome here," he said calmly. Voldemort did not answer him. It was like Dumbledore was a wall, and Voldemort had chosen to speak past it. "I offer you truth," Voldemort said to Alucard. "This world hides monsters behind laws and school songs. But you and I, we understand what power is." Alucard's eyes gleamed. "Power," he repeated. "And what do you want for it?" Voldemort's voice became smooth, almost gentle. "I want a partner," he said. "Someone who does not flinch. Someone who can step into death and return. Someone who can make the world stop pretending." Harry's hands clenched. Hermione's face tightened with disgust. Dumbledore's voice stayed quiet. "He wants a weapon," he said. Voldemort's presence shifted, and the torches flickered as if annoyed. "Albus," Voldemort said, almost politely. "You do love naming things as if names control them." Alucard laughed once, low. "He's right," Alucard said, glancing at Dumbledore. "You want to label me. It makes you feel safe." Dumbledore did not flinch. "I want the children safe," he corrected. Voldemort's voice returned to Alucard. You tasted the veil, he murmured. You felt the door. You felt the end. Alucard's smile thinned slightly. His eyes sharpened. So you know, Alucard said. I know many things, Voldemort replied. I know where the deepest magic lives. I know how to touch souls. I know how to unmake cages. Alucard tilted his head. And you offer me what? He asked. A tour? Voldemort's voice became colder. I offer you purpose, he said. Not school rules, not childish mercy. Purpose. Hunt with me, and you will never be bored again. There it was, the real hook. Not kindness, not friendship. A promise of endless battle and meaning through conquest. Alucard went quiet. Harry watched his face and felt something twist inside him. Alucard was smiling less now. He was thinking. Dumbledore stepped forward one pace. Alucard, he said gently, you do not owe him an answer. Alucard's eyes flicked to Dumbledore. No, he agreed. I don't owe anyone anything. Voldemort's voice turned sharp. Choose, it hissed. Monster or pet? Alucard's smile returned, and it was not playful. It was calm and cruel in a clean way. I have served kings, Alucard said. I have served humans who believed they could command the dark. The torches flared brighter, as if the castle leaned in to listen. Alucard's eyes locked on the twisting air. And you, he said softly, are neither a king nor a master. Voldemort's presence shuddered with anger. The air went colder for a moment. Alucard continued, voice smooth. You are a man in pieces, he said. A man who cut himself apart because he was afraid to end. Harry felt Hermione flinch beside him. Voldemort's voice dropped into something venomous. Careful, it whispered. Alucard's grin sharpened. No, he said. You be careful. Then Alucard leaned forward slightly, as if he was speaking to something that thought it was untouchable. I do not kneel, Alucard said. Not to you, not to him, not to the Ministry's pink rat. Ron made a strangled laugh in the middle of his fear. Umbridge was nowhere in the hall, but somehow it still felt satisfying. Voldemort's voice went quiet. Then it became smooth again, as if anger was a coat he could put away. Very well, Voldemort said. If you will not come to me, then I will come to you. The presence faded. The hall warmed slightly. The torches steadied. Harry realized he had been holding his breath. Dumbledore's voice was low. That was unwise, he said. Not blaming, just stating a truth. Alucard glanced at him. It was honest, he replied. McGonagall's voice snapped. Do you enjoy inviting him to attack a school? She demanded. Alucard looked at her. He was going to attack anyway, he said. Now he will do it smarter. Snape's eyes were cold. And you gave him a reason, he said. Alucard shrugged. He already had one, he said. My existence annoys him. Dumbledore held Alucard's gaze for a long moment. Then he spoke quietly, with something steady underneath. You refused him, Dumbledore said. Why? Alucard's smile faded a fraction. His eyes flicked, just once, toward the corridor, where students' dorms were, toward where children slept. Because he lies, Alucard said simply. Then he turned his head back to Dumbledore. And because, he added, voice softer, you built a castle that fights back. Dumbledore's expression warmed, just a little. Not triumph, not victory. Hope. Alucard looked away as if he didn't like that hope being seen. Don't misunderstand, Alucard said. I'm still bored. Dumbledore nodded once. Then perhaps, he said gently, we can give you something better than boredom. Alucard's eyes narrowed. Like what? He asked. Dumbledore's voice was quiet and plain. "A choice," he said. "To protect something without being owned." Alucard stared at him. Then he laughed once, low and sharp. "You are dangerous," Alucard said. "You tempt with kindness." Dumbledore did not deny it. The test came a week later. It started small, because Voldemort was clever now. It started with a rule. A new decree appeared on the walls at breakfast. By order of the Ministry, the creature known as Alucard is restricted to his assigned quarters from sunset to sunrise. Any violation will be met with immediate enforcement. Under it, Umbridge had added a neat little signature and a smiley face sticker that somehow made it worse. Filch nearly fainted from happiness. McGonagall ripped the decree down so hard the paper screamed. Umbridge appeared at the staff table like she had been waiting for it. "Professor," she said sweetly, "please do not destroy Ministry property." McGonagall's eyes blazed. "Please," she replied, voice shaking. "Leave my school." Umbridge's smile stayed wide. "If the headmaster will not control his guest," she said, "the Ministry must." Alucard sat at his cleared table, watching, eyes amused. He lifted his hand. His shadow slid across the floor and picked up the torn decree. It floated up and hovered in front of him. Alucard read it slowly. Then he looked at Umbridge. "Enforcement," he repeated. Umbridge's voice was syrupy. "For the children," she said. Alucard's eyes gleamed. "Of course," he murmured. He held the paper over a candle. It lit. Alucard watched it burn to ash with a small smile. Then he looked at Filch, who was practically vibrating. "Write it down," Alucard said politely. "Curfew violation." I complied. Filch blinked, confused, then scribbled anyway because Filch could not resist. Umbridge's smile twitched. Dumbledore watched it all with a tired patience, like he was watching a smaller war inside the bigger one. That night, Alucard broke the new restriction. Not quietly. He walked straight into the entrance hall at midnight and stood beneath the big clock like he wanted the castle to witness it. Umbridge's hired enforcement arrived, not Aurors. Something worse. A squad of Ministry agents with special chains and runes. Tools designed to hold magical creatures. They formed a circle around Alucard, wands raised, hands shaking. Their leader spoke with forced bravery. "By order of the Ministry," he said, "you will return to your quarters." Alucard smiled. "No," he said. The leader swallowed and flicked his wand. The runes on the chains lit up, casting a pale net of light across the floor. Alucard's shadow twitched as it hit the edge of the net. For a moment, the air pressed in. Hermione, watching from a side corridor with Harry and Ron, felt her stomach drop. "It's like the trap at the Ministry," she whispered. Harry's jaw tightened. "They're trying to bind him," Hermione finished. The leader shouted, "Now!" The chains flew. They wrapped around Alucard's arms and chest, glowing brighter as they tightened. Alucard looked down at them. He did not panic. He did not strain like a trapped animal. He sighed. "You brought cages into a school," he said softly. Then his body turned to shadow. The chains fell to the floor with a loud clatter. The Ministry agents stumbled back, eyes wide. Alucard reformed behind them. He did not hit them. He did not kill them. He simply spoke into the back of the leader's ear. "Go," Alucard said. The man shook so hard his wand rattled against his own teeth. Alucard added, very politely, "Before your boss learns how fast enforcement can disappear." The agents ran. They did not leave with dignity. They fled like men who had finally understood the scale of their mistake. Hermione exhaled, shaky. "He could have slaughtered them," she whispered. Ron's voice was small. "He didn't," he said. Harry watched Alucard stand alone in the hall again, coat perfect, eyes bright. Harry felt a strange, unwilling flicker of respect. Then the cold came. Not Dementor cold, a different cold, a thin, sharp feeling that slid under the skin. Alucard's head tilted, his smile faded. He looked toward the doors. A whisper pressed into the air, like a fingernail scraping stone. The wards trembled. McGonagall burst into the hall, wand raised. "What is it?" she snapped. Dumbledore appeared right behind her, calm but fast. Snape came too, face pale. Alucard's eyes gleamed. "He's here," Alucard said softly. Dumbledore's voice sharpened. "Everyone to defensive positions," he said. The castle answered him. Torches flared. Stone shifted. The air thickened with protective magic. Then the front doors exploded inward, not from a battering spell, from something that tore the lock of reality for a second. A wave of dark smoke rushed in, and in it moved masked figures, Death Eaters. But this time, they did not come with loud curses first. They came with purpose. 4 of them slammed metal stakes into the stone floor in a square around the entrance hall. The stakes lit with runes. The air inside the square vibrated. Hermione, watching from the stairs with Harry and Ron, felt her throat tighten. "That's not just an attack," she whispered. "That's a setup." Alucard stepped toward the square like he was curious. The moment his boot crossed the line, the runes flared. The air yanked at him from the inside. Not his skin, not his bones. Something deeper. Alucard's eyes widened slightly. His shadow snapped like a whip. The pull got stronger. A sound filled the hall, faint at first. Whispers, like the veil. Harry's stomach dropped. "No," he breathed. "They brought it here." One Death Eater shouted a chant, voice shaking with effort. The runes screamed with light, and Alucard's body tensed, not in pain like a cut, but in pressure, like a door being forced open. For a heartbeat, Hermione thought she saw faces in the air near Alucard's shadow. Shapes, hands, crowds, bound souls, tugged toward an ending. Ron whimpered. "Make it stop," he whispered. Alucard's mouth curled into a smile that was all teeth. "Oh," he said softly. "So you want to see what's inside." He lifted one hand. The shadows did not just rise. They erupted. A wall of darkness slammed outward, cracking the rune stakes like twigs. 2 stakes shattered. The pull weakened. A Death Eater screamed as his chant broke. McGonagall fired a spell that hit a Death Eater in the chest and threw him back into the doors. Flitwick appeared from a side hall, tiny but fierce, and launched rapid spells that snapped wands out of hands. Snape moved like a blade, cutting off escape routes, his spells clean and cruel. Dumbledore stepped forward and raised his wand. The hall filled with warm light like sunrise pushing back a storm. The whispering thinned, but the Death Eaters had one more move. A masked figure hurled a small glass orb into the center of the square. It shattered. A thin, black curtain of energy rose for half a second, like a tiny copy of the veil. The pull on Alucard spiked. Alucard's shoulders jerked. His smile vanished. For the first time in front of them all, he looked truly challenged. Not by strength. By the idea of an ending that didn't care how strong he was. Harry saw it. Dumbledore saw it. Voldemort wanted proof again. Not to kill Alucard here, to learn what kind of key could turn the lock. A Death Eater shouted, "Take the boy!" Another group surged toward the stairs, toward Harry. Harry's chest went cold. Hermione's wand snapped up. Ron shouted. Then Alucard moved, not toward the veil copy, not toward the rune stakes, toward the students. He crossed the hall in a blur, and the Death Eater reaching for Harry hit an invisible wall of shadow. The man slammed backward, choking. Alucard stood between the stairs and the attackers, like a living warning sign. His eyes were bright with rage now. Not protective rage like a father. Something older. A predator furious that someone tried to take what was in front of him. "You don't touch them," Alucard said softly. The Death Eater tried to raise his wand. Alucard's shadow snapped the wand in half. Another Death Eater fired a killing curse. Alucard let it hit his shoulder. His body tore and reformed in the same breath. His eyes didn't even blink. He stepped forward, grabbed the Death Eater by the mask, and lifted him off the ground. Not strangling. Not crushing. Just holding him up like a lesson. "This is a school," Alucard said, voice low and clear. "If you want a war, go fight adults." Then he threw the man across the hall. The Death Eater hit the stone wall and slid down. McGonagall shouted, "Back!" to the students. "Move!" Dumbledore's voice rang. "Evacuate the stairwells! Now!" Teachers and order members poured in, guiding students away, shielding them with spells. The hall became a fight zone, and the kids became cargo that had to be moved fast. The veil copy flickered again. The whispering rose. Alucard's jaw tightened. He looked toward it, eyes sharp. Then he made a choice. He did not rush it like a hero trying to win glory. He did not ignore it like a fool. He treated it like a dangerous tool. He pointed his hand at the floor beneath it. The shadows pierced down like spears. The stone cracked. The tiny veil copy wobbled. Alucard's shadow wrapped around it like a fist closing. For a moment the whispering screamed. Then it snapped out like a candle pinched between fingers. Silence fell for half a heartbeat. The Death Eaters faltered. Dumbledore did not waste the moment. He lifted his wand and spoke a single spell that shook the air. The stone floor rose into a wave and slammed forward, pushing the remaining Death Eaters back through the broken doors. McGonagall's spells followed like fists. Flitwick's spells followed like darts. Snape's spells followed like knives. The Death Eaters retreated, not because they were all defeated, but because their mission was done. They had seen what they needed. They had felt the pull work. They had proved a key could turn. Bellatrix's laugh echoed from the doorway as she vanished into smoke. "See you soon," she sang. "See you when you break." Alucard stared at the empty doorway, breathing steady. His coat hung perfect, but his shadow was restless. Dumbledore stepped beside him, voice low, so only Alucard could hear. "That was not a simple attack," Dumbledore said. Alucard's smile returned, thin. "No," he agreed. "It was a measurement." Dumbledore looked at the shattered rune stakes. "And what did they learn?" he asked. Alucard's eyes gleamed. "That I can be pulled," he said quietly. Dumbledore's voice stayed calm. "And what did you learn?" he asked. Alucard looked toward the stairwell, where frightened students were being led away. He watched them disappear behind protective spells and teachers' bodies, his expression softened by 1 degree. Not warm, not kind, but focused. "I learned," Alucard said, "that he will bring the door to me if I don't walk to it." Dumbledore nodded once. "Yes," he said. Alucard's grin sharpened. "Good," he said. "Then I don't have to leave." McGonagall marched up, furious. "You will not be baiting my school," she snapped. Alucard looked at her. "You already are," he said plainly. "All of you." McGonagall's wand twitched. Dumbledore lifted a hand, and she stopped. Alucard turned toward the broken doors. Then he spoke, not loud, but clear enough that the teachers nearby heard him. "I will not join your enemy," Alucard said, "and I will not be owned by your ministry." Umbridge appeared in the doorway of a side corridor, as if she had been hiding behind it, eyes wide, face pale. Alucard glanced at her and smiled. But, he continued, I will kill anything that enters this castle to harm children. Umbridge swallowed. McGonagall went still. Snape's eyes narrowed like he didn't trust promises. Dumbledore's gaze held steady. And if you decide I am the threat, Alucard added, looking straight at Umbridge now, then don't send paper. Send someone brave. Umbridge's mouth opened. No sound came out. Alucard turned away like she was no longer worth looking at. He walked toward the main doors, stepped over broken stone, and paused at the threshold. Filch appeared from nowhere, clutching his notebook like a shield. Curfew, Filch squeaked, voice trembling. You're out? Past. Alucard looked down at him. Then, in the middle of smoke and broken doors and exhausted teachers, Alucard gave a polite nod. You are correct, he said. He turned around and walked back into the castle. Filch blinked, then wrote furiously. Alucard. Curfew violation. Complied again. Ron, watching from the stairs, let out a shaky laugh through fear. Hermione didn't laugh, but her eyes were wet. Harry stared at Alucard's back as he walked away. For the first time, Harry understood the new shape of their world. They still had Voldemort. They still had fear. But now, Hogwarts had something else too. A monster who had chosen, in his own strange way, to stand between the dark and the children. Not because he was gentle, because he decided the castle was his ground, and no one else got to hunt on it. Night returned to Hogwarts like it always did, quiet, black, and full of secrets. Weeks after the attack, after the shouting and the repairs, after the newest ministry decrees peeled off the walls and got replaced again, Harry found himself walking toward the astronomy tower. He didn't know why his feet went there. Maybe because he needed air. Maybe because he needed to see something that didn't lie. The sky was clear. Stars hung sharp and bright. The wind was cold, but it was normal cold. Not Dementor cold. Not Veil cold. Harry stepped onto the tower and stopped. Alucard was already there. He stood at the edge, coat moving slightly in the breeze. He looked up at the sky like it was an old book he had read too many times. Harry hesitated. Alucard didn't turn around. You're loud, he said. Harry's cheeks warmed. I'm trying not to be, he muttered. Alucard gave a small hum, like that amused him. Harry stepped closer, keeping a careful distance. You could leave, Harry said, voice quiet. You don't have to stay. Alucard finally turned his head a little, red eyes catching starlight. Do you want me to leave? Alucard asked. Harry swallowed. He thought of the Death Eaters, the rune stakes, the whispering pull, the way Alucard stepped in front of the stairs. Harry answered honestly. I don't know, he admitted. Alucard's smile was small. Good, he said. That's closer to truth than most adults manage. Harry looked down at his hands. Why did you do it? He asked. Why did you stop them from taking us? Alucard stared at him for a long moment. Harry expected a joke, a cruel answer. Instead, Alucard spoke quietly. Because I dislike thieves, he said simply. Harry blinked. That's it? He asked. Alucard's eyes narrowed slightly. It's enough, he said. The wind pushed over the tower again. Harry stared out at the grounds. The lake below was a dark sheet. The castle windows glowed warm. You talked to him, Harry said. Voldemort. You called him a man in pieces. Alucard's smile sharpened. He is, he said. Harry's throat tightened. He'll come again, Harry said. Yes, Alucard replied. Harry looked up at him. And you'll... What? He asked. Fight him forever? Alucard's gaze flicked to the horizon. Forever is boring, he said. Then, after a short pause, he added, But this place is less boring than most. Harry frowned. Because of the war? He asked. Alucard's eyes slid toward the castle walls. "Because it refuses," he said. "It refuses to be easy." Harry didn't fully understand, but he understood enough. "Dumbledore offered you trust," Harry said softly. Alucard's smile thinned. "He offered me a choice," he corrected. Harry swallowed. "And you took it." Alucard did not nod. He did not say yes. He simply said, "I'm still here." That was his version of an answer. Below, on the grounds, a silver light appeared for a moment. A Patronus, one of the teachers on patrol. The bright animal shape moved along the edge of the lawn, checking shadows, then faded. Harry watched it disappear. Then he noticed something else. Alucard's shadow did not cross into the silver light. It stayed back, as if it had decided the light belonged to someone else. Harry looked at him, surprised. Alucard caught the look and smirked. "Don't romanticize it," he said. "I just dislike being told where to stand." Harry let out a small breath that was almost a laugh. Behind them, the tower door creaked open. Filch's voice rose from the stairwell, furious and triumphant. "Curfew! I knew it! I knew you'd be out!" Harry's stomach dropped. "Oh no," he whispered. Alucard sighed like a man hearing a fly. He turned toward the door and called down, perfectly polite. "You are correct." Filch froze mid-step like he had been punched by politeness. Harry stared at Alucard, stunned. Alucard glanced back at Harry with a small, sharp smile. Then he walked past the door, down the stairs, as if he was actually going to comply. Harry heard Filch's pencil start scribbling like mad. Harry stood alone on the tower for a moment, the wind cold on his face, the stars quiet above him. The war was still there. The fear was still there. But Hogwarts had changed. There was a new kind of guardian in the castle now. Not a hero with a cape, not a teacher with rules. A monster who had chosen, for reasons only he fully understood, to stand on the side of the children. Harry looked out at the dark grounds and whispered to himself, simple and honest. "Please," he said, "let that choice last." And somewhere below, the castle kept breathing, steady and stubborn, like it always had. Just different now.